Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Schultz, and I am the Water Education Specialist with the California Department of Water Resources. I'd like to welcome you to Water Wednesday. Tomorrow, as you may know, is Earth Day. 51 years ago tomorrow, on April 22nd, 1970, 10 million Americans came together to raise awareness of environmental issues. It had been a really rough couple of years. In 1969, the Cuyahoga River in Ohio caught fire for the 12th time in 100 years. Also in 1969, there was an oil spill off the coast of Santa Barbara, California. That it spilled an estimated 3 million gallons of oil into the ocean, covering over 800 square miles of coastal waters, 12 miles of beaches, and killing thousands of fish and animals. Air pollution in places like Los Angeles made it seem like the cities were cloaked in a thick blanket of clouds, except these clouds, they smelled bad and they made it dangerous for people to go outdoors, made it very hard to breathe. And in the eastern US, pollution from factories was creating acid rain that killed forests and fish. And so on April 22nd, 1970, the American people came together and demanded change. And in response, President Nixon and the United States Congress established the Environmental Protection Agency, and along with many states, passed laws to protect environmental and human health. And thanks to these actions, we've seen a lot of progress, but there is still a lot to be done. As we all know, especially if we've ever spent time around toddlers, it's much easier and quicker to make a mess than to clean it up. And so we continue to celebrate Earth Day each year, not just here in America now, but throughout the world, to raise the awareness of ongoing challenges. And each year, Earth Day has a different theme. And this year's theme is Restore the Earth. Now, here at the Department of Water Resources, our mission is to sustainably manage the water resources of California in cooperation with other agencies to benefit the state's people and protect, restore, and enhance the natural and human environment. So for this month, we are looking at restoration projects that DWR is working on. Last week, we heard about FloodMar, which is a multi-benefit program that helps restore groundwater aquifers. And the week before that, we heard about EcoRestore, which is another multi-benefit program that is focused on restoring the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. Multi-benefit just means it does more than one thing. For FloodMar, it restores our aquifers while also helping provide flood risk mitigation and also habitat for fish and wildlife. So there's some really interesting programs. Today, we are going to be talking about the Salton Sea, and we are joined by Melinda Doran, who is working on restoration projects in and around the Salton Sea. So before I turn things over to Melinda, I just want to do a quick Zoom overview for anyone joining us on Water Wednesday for the first time. As you may have noticed when you joined, we've asked that you keep your cameras and your microphones off. This just helps avoid any distracting noises in the background while Melinda's talking. But we do really want to hear from you. If you're joining us on Zoom, you have the opportunity to submit questions about the Salton Sea or about the projects to Melinda. And you do that by going down to the bottom of your screen. There should be a little button that says chat on it. And you just click on that and go ahead and you send your questions to me, Kathy, your co-host. And we will get through as many of them as we can. We also have closed captions available for those who like or need them. It's just a little bit over to the right of chat. You'll see a box, dark box with the letters CC in it, and that allows you to turn on or off the captions as you wish. So that pretty much takes us through Zoom, and I'd like to go ahead and turn things over now to Melinda.
Thanks, Kathy, for introducing me. So thank you for having me on Water Wednesday, and I'm looking forward to sharing about the Salton Sea Management Program. So the location of the Salton Sea is, it's the largest inland sea in California. It's about 2.5 hours east of San Diego. And for thousands of years, this area flooded from the Colorado River when the Colorado River overflowed its banks. And it was called the Salton Sink. In the early 1900s, an irrigation canal was dug from the Colorado River and to the Imperial Valley to irrigate farmland. And in 1905, water broke through that canal. And for almost 2 years before repairs were made, water flowed into the Salton Sink and it flooded this area and became the Salton Sea. Have you ever been to the desert in California? What do you notice about the temperature and the habitats? Is there a lot of water or is there a little bit of water out here? The Salton Sea is interesting because it's a terminal lake, and that just means that there's water that flows into it, but there's no water that flows out of it. Lands around the Salton Sea. So there's about 650,000 people that live around the Salton Sea. There's desert habitats, Anza Borrego is to the west and the Chocolate Mountains are to the east. And south of the Salton Sea, as you can see in this image, there's a lot of farmland. The water from the Colorado River is used to irrigate this farmland, and then the water goes through agricultural drains and it drains into the sea. The temperature here is warm. It's pretty hot, actually. It is the desert. And there's very little rain, only about 2 inches of rain a year on average. These are all reasons why Imperial County is great for farming. Changing conditions at the sea. So the water level in the sea has always fluctuated depending on how much rain and the heat and the function of the Colorado River back before the sea was a permanent fixture. More water evaporates from the sea than gets put into the sea. An Imperial Irrigation District sold some of its farm water, agricultural water, to San Diego in 2003. And since then, the water has been receding more quickly. As you can see in this picture, the area that was wet in 2017 was dry in 2020. Because the sea is getting smaller, it is now also getting saltier, and it's about 1.5 times as salty as the Pacific Ocean. Many of the fish that used to live in the sea that feed the birds can no longer live in the salty water. So the food web and the ecosystem at the sea have started to collapse, making it hard for the animals who depend on the resources to survive. What do you think about transferring water from these agricultural areas to urban areas where people live? And how do you think decisions that we make today affect the future? This is a complex issue that many people and groups of people are working to resolve and to improve the conditions out at the sea. So as I mentioned, there's an ecosystem out at the Salton Sea. It includes habitats and the species which live in the water and the birds and the animals that eat them. So because the sea is so salty or saline, animals that live in the water can't survive, and the birds that then eat the fish also don't have enough food. The effect of this is there can be less birds, which is abundance, and less types of birds or other animals, which is diversity. The program is working to restore and create habitats at the sea to maintain the ecosystem that has been lost. And in this slide, you see some examples of birds, although there's a lot of species that live at the sea. And on the over the water is a brown pelican. There's also rails that like living in the wetlands. And then there's also a snowy plover, and that bird nests right on the dry lake bed. There's also fish that came into the Salton Sea with the Colorado River water. This actually is not one of them. This is a desert pupfish, and it is endemic to the sea. They live in the agricultural drains, and they also used to use the sea to move from drain to drain so that their populations were a lot bigger. But with the sea being salty and some of the drains being disconnected, they can't move around as well. Populations have become isolated. Desert pupfish have evolved to live out in the desert conditions and can live in water that's up to 100 degrees. They can also live in water that is salty. but they have parameters. So they can't live in the sea anymore that's become 1.5 times as salty as the Pacific Ocean, but they can live in the drains, even though that water is salty too. So we talked about the species that live there. There's also a human health aspect of the project and the program. And when wind blows over the dry lake bed, it forms dust plumes, and you can see one in this picture. And they have small particle sizes, and they can impact human health. So the small particle sizes can stay in your lungs and cause asthma and other health conditions. Asthma rates in children are really high in Imperial County. Where you live, does your school limit outside exercise when the temperatures are hot, maybe over 100 degrees? Or if there's been a wildfire, do you notice the smoke in the air and the particles? When air quality is not very good, there's a lot of recommendations to not do exercise or to stay inside. And those restrictions help you to stay healthy. The Salton Sea program is working to lower the dust for the people who live near the Salton Sea. I have a little video just to show what the sea looks like and sounds like. Get a feel for how big it is. So as I mentioned, this is a big interdisciplinary program, which means there's a lot of people from a lot of different careers and backgrounds and jobs and groups that work together to trying to resolve the problem. This is just an example of some of the agencies that are working together, the state agencies and federal agencies. So there's some that do permitting, there's some that do research, there's some that own land out there, but there's also a lot of local agencies from Imperial County and Riverside County, and there's also groups called non-governmental organizations such as Audubon and community environmental justice organizations that work with the state in order to implement projects and help the conditions get better. So an example of what it takes to build a project out there. We may have a project proposal for an area at the sea, and then some of the things that have to happen before it can get built is we have to find money for it. So that's the funding question. We also have to permit things. So there's laws in California and in the United States to protect the people that live here. Some of those are to protect the environment, and there's also other permits that we have to get to. We have to design the project to be successful. And a lot of the time that takes scientific research in order to come up with the best proposal. Once we have a project, we have to develop the contracts to build them. So we have to do a lot of paperwork, and then those projects have to be built. And then once they're built, there's a lot of operations and maintenance so that the projects can stay successful. The neat thing about this program is, like I said, there's a lot of different careers that it takes to build a project. So there's scientists, there's fish scientists, there's bird scientists, ornithologists, there's engineers, and there might be engineers that work on soils or how to build berms or earthquakes and all sorts of different engineering categories. There's also people that track the money and develop contracts. And so it takes a large team from many different sectors in order to build these projects. One of the projects that is an example of a success story is the Species Conservation Habitat Project. This project is at the southern end of the sea, and it's being built to both suppress dust, so it will have water on it, and it's also providing habitat to the species that live out there. So you can see in this figure, there's some green dots on there. Those are all habitat islands, and they will provide habitat for birds to nest and also to hang out. They call them loafing or resting islands. There's also different depths of water. So there will be deep water, that's deeper than 10 feet. There'll be some mid-range water that is like 4 feet to 10 feet. And then there's shallow water, and some of the water will only be a few inches deep so that the birds can forage right in the mud flats. There's also on the southern boundary of this, there is let me see if I can get the laser pointer to work. On the southern boundary, there is a ditch that runs all the way along here, and it goes all the way up to the sea. And this ditch is being built just to provide habitat for desert pupfish. And there's pupfish that live in the drains, as we mentioned, they live in these drains, and because they can't use the sea anymore, now the pupfish will be able to go down a drain, down the ditch, and then up another drain, or they'll be able to continue all the way down the ditch to another drain. And so they can move up and back, which allows for greater genetic diversity. The project will pump water from the New River, which is this red on the map, and that will get mixed with water that comes out of the sea. So as I mentioned earlier, the sea is becoming saltier as it's getting smaller. And so we're mixing the water, fresh water and salt water. And there's this channel that goes all the way out to the sea. And that will provide a salinity level in the water that the fish can live in. The water will move through these ponds and then it will be discharged back out to the sea. So it took a long time to build this project. The project was planned in 2007. It received permits in 2013, and it just started construction in January of this year. It took time to design, permit, and fund it. The state of California needed to find someone to construct it and then develop the contracts to do that. So as I said, construction started in January of this year, and it will take about 2 years to build. So it should be done at the end of 2023 and operational in 2024. As you can see, it looks like part of this is already wet. Well, this image was from 2015. It's a Google Earth image, and all of this water is gone. So the sea has already receded out to this northern edge. So it's an old photo and conditions have been changing rapidly out there. Future projects at the sea. So the Species Conservation Habitat Project is just one of the projects that the state is undertaking. We're also in this planning phase for 26,000 more acres of habitat restoration projects. And those are to provide habitat and also to provide dust suppression. So that's about 20,000 football fields worth of projects. We're working with the communities and we're working with all of our agency partners to come up with a good plan, to have that plan permitted and to implement it. That's a 10-year plan. There's also, which we also call the mid-range plan, but there's also a long-term plan. And that long-term plan is being researched right now to determine what might be feasible and what it might cost. And one of the ideas is to actually pipe water in from either the Sea of Cortez or from San Diego. So that's just one of the ideas. There's also been talk of a perimeter lake, and really the state's collecting different ideas to determine what might be feasible and how long it would take to build. Kathy, I'm ready for questions if.
Awesome, thank you. And we've got questions coming in. So first of all, I wanted to start off with one question going back to the start of your presentation. You mentioned that before this was the Salton Sea with the permanent water, it was the Salton Sink. Can you explain a little bit, what is a sink?
So a sink is pretty similar to the sea. And what happened is the Colorado River in a big rain year would overflow its banks and all of the water would flood to the lowest possible area. And that was the Salton Sea area. But there was still no water draining from the lake, but there was also not regular water going into the lake. So this is over thousands of years. Water would come from the Colorado River. It would pour into this area and then it would slowly evaporate. Well, by doing that, it actually deposited a lot of soil that led to fertile farmland, and it also just provided temporary areas for birds to roost or stop or migrate. So there wasn't water that went to this area every year, and it might take a while for the water to evaporate out, but because there's no water, because it's a terminal lake, or because it's an area, it was called a sink because it was kind of a one-way system.
Okay, but instead of the water draining down, it would eventually evaporate from the heat.
Correct. But now, because water goes into it from agriculture, it's maintained.
Got it, that makes sense. And what makes it a sea instead of a lake?
It's the salinity. So the Colorado River water is pretty salty already. And so when the Salton Sea has actually always been saltier than a freshwater lake.
Okay. And the Colorado River is so salty because I mean, it literally starts in Colorado and then makes its way through several other states, right? Arizona, Utah, Colorado, and it just picks up the minerals along the way.
Correct. So here's actually the Colorado River. It's on the border of California and Arizona. And actually down at the bottom of the map, just cut off, is Mexico. And so the Colorado River would flood and it would come down the watershed and it would fill the area. And, but yes, that water has always been saltier. It carries a lot of soil and particles but yeah, correct.
Wow, that must have been some pretty big floods to have reached from the river all the way to the Salton Sink. Or is it just downhill from there all the way?
I don't know the answer to that, but I'm pretty sure it's probably pretty close to downhill, which is also why they were able to build the irrigation canals um, from the Colorado River out to Imperial County.
That makes sense. Um, let's see. There's a question here about how do you mix the water with the salty water so the fish can live? I'm not sure which water they're referring to, if it's the agricultural water or possibly the water that you talked about maybe bringing in from the Sea of Cortez or the Pacific Ocean, or from San Diego, because those would be like ocean water, right?
Correct. So I don't know the whole plan for the long-term plan, but that would be direct import. In this project, water is mixed. So you can see this channel. So this is the salty water from the sea, and it's being built right on the new river, this project. So these little berms right here, this is a mixing pond. So there will be an opportunity for water to be diverted out of the river, and then this salty water is pumped and it's mixed in these little ponds, and then that water is spread out onto these ponds. And so there's a series of gates and other structures that allow that water. So the water is actually mixed before it goes. There's a mixing zone before the water goes into the ponds. The interesting thing, because the sea is getting saltier, is there's a lot of modeling that gets done, and over time there will be less water pumped out of the sea and more fresh water used. So in order to maintain the 20 to 40 parts per thousand of salt in the water that is the optimal to provide habitat for the fish that live there, they actually, over time, they need less salt water and more fresh water to keep that in balance.
Okay. And I had a question I was going to ask you, and I just blanked on it. So something to do with the water. Oh, I know what it was. I was just going to clarify for everybody who's watching that the new river, that's actually an existing river, because this was something that was confusing when we first talked about this. It's not a new river that we're like digging and creating. There's just a river in the area that's called New River, correct?
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. There's a question here about the selenium in the water will restoration of the restoration project at Salton Sea, is any of that going to include selenium removal? Is that part of the midterm or possibly the long-term plan?
So that's a good question. So the selenium, part of the program is to work with the other agencies to monitor where selenium is around the sea. It is not part of like the Species Conservation Habitat Project or the SSMP to do removal, although other agencies like the regional board and there are other agencies that track it and determine what needs to be done for beneficial uses. But as part of this program, we're not doing selenium removal. But as the projects get built, in order to inform how to best design the next projects and to add to the scientific knowledge, there will be selenium sampling in some of these locations.
Great. And I have a couple people asking, why are DWR and the other agencies interested in restoring the Salton Sea and working on these projects?
So when water was sold to San Diego by Imperial Irrigation District, part of the agreement was that the state would help mitigate or help um, figure out a solution to any issues that arose from the water transfer. And so the state has been a part of this program for quite a few years, and working with Imperial County on projects to mitigate the dust and the habitat changes. But that's pretty much why the state has been involved in the program.
And you said, I think at the beginning, you said there's like 650,000 people who live around the sea. Is that correct?
Correct.
As,
A
as,
lot
as
of
a
the
big,
folks that live around the sea live on the northern end of the sea, so Palm Desert and Bermuda Dunes, but there's also communities at the southern end of the sea.
got it.
Actually, there's communities all around the sea, but
I think it was going to be it was supposed to be a big resort area at one point, or it actually was.
it was, yep, back in the 50s and the 60s when the sea was even fuller. There's a lot of marinas around the sea, and some of those have gone dry. There's boat ramps and things. So yes, there was a lot of, in certain communities, there's lot divisions that you can see on the landowner maps.
And if people wanted to visit the Salton Sea, can they still do that? Can they see any of these projects that are being developed and implemented?
For sure. So of course you can visit the sea. There's lots of areas to go out to the seabed. In this project, the Species Conservation Habitat Project, right here in this corner, part of the project includes a observation and a visitor, not really a visitor center, but a visitor's observation point. And there will be parking for cars and school buses and interpretive panels talking about the ecosystem at the sea. And there are other areas that you can, that are public access to the sea. And as more and more projects come online, one of the questions has been, how do we incorporate some passive recreation, which might include trails and bird watching and maybe some kayaking and some of these projects. And Audubon, California, if you go to their webpage, they also have a lot of information on the Salton Sea, and they're working to preserve wetlands, and there's just a whole host of different habitats out here that can be restored and enhanced. So there will be, that is a question that comes up a lot in the program, is how do we make it accessible for the people that are visiting and for the people that live here?
Great. So there's a recommendation. Somebody sent a direct message to me that Bombay Beach is a must see if anyone goes down there.
Excellent.
And the idea of importing the seawater to supplement the lake, that's the practicality of that is one of the things that's under review right now. Is that correct?
Correct.
Great. All right. Well, that pretty much brings us to the end of our time here. So Melinda, thank you so much for taking us on a trip down to the Salton Sea today. And thanks to everybody who joined from home. If you'd like to learn more about the Salton Sea or other DWR programs, please do visit our webpage, water.ca.gov. We also have a specific website for the Salton Sea program. And if you have children at home or if you're a teacher, please visit our water.ca.gov/education-materials page. We have a number of free workbooks and handouts and guides on how to do different water science activities at home. We don't have anything specific to the Salton Sea, but we do have a lot of fun activities for kids, as well as information on how to conserve water, which is going to be critically important this year and really important every year going forward. And again, I think Melinda mentioned is it California Audubon page?
California Audubon and also Natural Resources Agency, they both have web pages about the Salton Sea.
Great. And to keep abreast of the Salton Sea project or other things DWR is working on, to find out about our upcoming Water Wednesdays, please follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. As a matter of fact, all of our previous Water Wednesdays are available on YouTube. Um, and we will be back next Wednesday with one more presentation on some of the restoration work DWR is doing in honor of Earth Day's theme. And we'll be talking with Esther Tracy about urban creeks and some of the restoration work that's being done on them. So in the meantime, please have a very good week, everybody, and we hope to see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.